Christina, please take roll call now and note who's present and who's missing.
Okay, good morning. Committee member Arnrich,
Here.
committee member Pierce,
Here.
committee member Taylor.
Visually here.
Okay. Vice Chair Geringer
Here.
and Chair Butt.
Here.
All
Okay,
members are present.
okay, I have some instructions to read that I've been instructed to read. I will request any committee questions and comments on an agenda item. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand using the raise hand feature of Zoom. And I want to add, some people have a hard time finding that. So if you can't find it, just do this, okay? Raise the hand feature of Zoom. Christina or I will call on you. Staff will unmute your mic. After you speak, staff will remute your mic and lower your hand. I will request any public comment. If anyone from the public attending the meeting wishes to speak during an agenda item, please raise your hand or press *9 if you're on the phone. Christina or I will call on you to speak and unmute your mic. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. After 3 minutes, your mic will be automatically remuted and your hand will be lowered. If an action is required on an agenda item, the chair will call the vote. Christina will conduct a roll call vote. When Christina calls on you, staff will unmute your mic, you'll vote, and then staff will remute your mic. Any questions? Everybody understand that? Good. Okay. The next item on the agenda is public comment. Christina, have we received any public comment?
No, we have received no public comment.
Is there anyone wishing to speak during public comment on an item that is not part of the agenda? If so, please raise your hand and I or staff will call on you. Okay, looks like we have no public comment. The next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from March 5th, 2020. Are there any changes, comments, or so on from the committee?
Move approval.
Accept.
Okay, we had a motion from who?
Newell.
From
And-
Newell,
and
second from Pierce.
Yep.
Okay, Christina, please conduct a roll call vote.
Committee member Taylor.
I said thumbs up.
Oh, thumbs up. Okay. Vice Chair Geringer,
Aye.
Chair Butt.
Yes,
Motion
I vote
moved.
yes too. I vote yes as well.
Oh, I'm sorry,
And so is
Commissioner
Julie.
Arnrich
And so is Julie.
and Julie. I'm sorry. Do you want me to also include the motion of the first and second when I do the vote? Okay. Okay, so motion passed anonymously by majority of committee members. So it's 5 yeas vote.
I've never seen Commissioner Taylor at a loss for words before.
He's gonna figure out how to unmute himself.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. Are there any changes, comments, or so forth from the committee?
I just, Chair Butt, I just want to make 2 comments. One, thank you, staff. I see we reduced costs by travel. Nothing really happening in there. I assume we're going to have the deep dive discussion about sales tax, even though there's a report on it in here. So will we just include that all on the public items?
Wait, I'm not sure. You want to take an item off the consent?
No, I'm just questioning. I just want to make sure that we're going to have.
Oh, yeah.
Sort of just not,
We will.
instead of talking about it separately, since there's sales tax on the consent calendar report, we just talk about all the sales tax issues.
Yeah, well, that's just accepting a report for the period ended already, so.
Yeah, but I've got questions, and I'll move to accept the consent calendar.
Okay, did I hear a motion?
Yes,
Second,
Who made the motion?
I did.
Arnerick, second by
Geringer. Second.
Geringer. Okay, please call the roll, Christina.
Okay, committee member Arnrich,
Aye.
committee member Pierce,
Aye.
committee member Taylor. Thumbs up.
Yes.
Vice Chair Geringer,
Aye.
Chair Butt.
Yes.
This motion passed anonymously,
Unanimously.
unanimously.
Bob is a little anonymous. It is unanimous.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is a legislative update. Lindsay Willis will present this item.
Morning, Chair Butt and Commissioners. Happy Thursday. We have by special request for you today, both our federal advocate and our state advocate to give you their respective updates. So isn't technology wonderful? I'm going to let our federal advocate, Jason Tai, and his team kick it off and share with you what's happening in Washington, and then he'll take any questions. And then when we're done with him, we'll move on to Mark Watson. He can update you with what's happening at the state. I know both are pretty busy right now. So Jason, go ahead, take it away.
Great, thank you, Lindsay. Good morning, Mr. Chair, Ms. Vice Chair, and the members of the committee. I also have Gus Maples, who's one of my colleagues here in Washington, calling in. I don't know if some of you had a chance to meet with him. He just started in January and was formerly a staff member on the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee on Transportation. So played a very significant role in helping create the ADS grant that the team worked so hard to lobby on many years ago with Mr. DeSaulnier and Ms. Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi. So as all of you can probably gather, there's absolutely nothing happening in Washington. When I say that, I'd say certainly with a tongue-in-cheek. Since we probably last been in California, a number of very challenging and sad occurrences have taken place that we're all aware of. Congress has moved rather quickly, strangely quickly, to address a number of these things. They're trying to address it over the last 2 months or a month and a half. There have been 5 different legislative measures that have been passed, starting with the first bill on March 6th, which provided $8.3 billion worth of funding for COVID-19 vaccine research and development. On March 18th, a bill was passed and enacted for $104 billion, kind of this phase 2 package for emergency family and medical leave and increased unemployment benefits for workers and family. And I think most recently, the large $2 trillion package called CARES Act that passed March 27th and enacted into law shortly thereafter, which provided, I think, for all of us, a very significant sum of funding for infrastructure spending, primarily on the transit side, $25 billion for transit operations, of which was portioned through the FTA, $50 billion in loans and guarantees and grants for airlines, and $10 billion for airports under AIP funding under FAA, and a significant sum for Amtrak as well. One thing I think we would point out from the phase 3 bill, the CARES Act, it also included, for a number of you who are so active and serve on the local elected levels, there was $150 billion for states and locals for COVID-19 emergency funding, which was apportioned out through essentially a population-based formula. I think the allocation is, as you folks know probably better than us, $15.3 billion was allocated in a portion for the state of California. And in certain criteria was provided in how the states and locals would distribute the monies. also provided, which may be of interest to some, the U.S. Department of Commerce's Economic Development Administration, which is essentially, as you may know, the successor to the old school work WPA. $1.5 billion was included in that pot of funds for not only technical assistance, but also funding for public works and infrastructure projects for communities that are economically disadvantaged. And so that announcement just came out, although it was appropriated a month ago. The allocation was just notified today and or yesterday. Just in April 24th, kind of what they call the phase 3.5 bill provided additional funding for the SBA's PPP program that provided loans for businesses and nonprofits and many other different interests in that vein. And then now we stand at the precipice of what is potentially a phase 4 bill. There's some discussion that there will be infrastructure funding. The key elements in there are probably, as Speaker Pelosi has advocated for as early as last week, an additional $1 trillion to go for states and local units of government in several different tranches, so there would not be competition between counties, cities, and the states. It has been somewhat more politicized in this particular debate, in that Senator McConnell, the majority leader, is advocating for tort reform and liability protections. And then President Trump has also advocated tying that $1 trillion or whatever comes out of it into ensuring that munis and states amend and change their immigration policies to eliminate protections for unauthorized immigrants. So those are some of the key elements that have been happening in dealing or trying to deal with the challenges of COVID-19 and the recession that many have said is upon us. But there are also various elements in terms of the regular order of business that Congress needs to undertake. There is a annual thing called the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. It authorizes the entire military, all the programs and projects contained within, and also the FAST Act, Surface Transportation Bill, which was originally enacted in 2015 at $305 billion and is set to expire at the end of this September. So there are many things going on. There are many things that will continue to go on, and I suspect that where there's going to be a lot of debate over the next month or two, depending on how the discussions go for the next stimulus package and how much that will entail and who gets what. And so with that, Gus, I don't know if I missed anything outside of that, but happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Anybody have questions? I see on my cheat sheet here that we're supposed to take a vote on this, but I don't know what the action is. Normally
Sorry.
we don't vote on legislative reports.
Sorry to interrupt, Chair, but I think it's actually Mark's presentation. He's going to give an update on a few items and ask APC to recommend a position on a bill or two to the board. So if we don't have any questions for Jason, maybe Mark, you can give your update.
Okay, so we need to vote or not?
After Mark.
Oh, okay. Okay, so the okay, yeah, all right, go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, Chair Butts and committee members. I'm pleased to be here today via Zoom. It's my first one, so I hope I do all right. Basically, I want to start off by talking a little bit about the governor and what's coming up in the next week or so. And in fact, there's news that's hot off the press as I was sitting here, so I'll cover that briefly as well. So the next major step that the governor is intending to take is the release of the May revise this coming week on May 14th. And that will show a complete overhaul of the budget proposal he announced back in January. And that is really becoming underscored as just now the Sacramento Bee reported that the governor has indicated that the size of California's deficit has gone from a $20 billion reserve and a $220 billion budget to a $53 billion deficit.
Oh
That's
God.
the projected deficit for the rest of this year and the coming year. And that came about by virtue of the fact that he's been actively engaged in conversations in Washington and had to kind of show his cards instead of waiting until the 14th. So I think it's a shocking number. I think we've been expecting a big number, but to go from a nice healthy budget with a good reserve to upside down by $50+ billion in the space of several months is shocking. And so we will be monitoring that and providing any input and information as quick as we can on the 14th to Lindsay and your staff. Turning to the legislature, I think it was fair to say that they both adjourned back in March, mid-March, March 19th, and had originally intended to come back mid-April. Now it's extended to May 4th for the assembly. They have returned. They've started conducting policy hearings. In fact, the first policy hearing conducted was Chair Frazier's Transportation Committee. He's had several bills of interest, 2 high-speed rail bills that passed out of his committee that deal with aspects of high-speed rail, an omnibus bill and a committee bill that may be something that moves through the process this year. We'll see how that goes in the Senate. They are due to come back on May 14th as well. And they've just released their policy committee schedule for the ensuing weeks after that. They would intend to get their work done in the policy committees by, I want to say, May 29th. So between May 14th and May 29th, it's going to be jam-packed with policy hearings. And they're conducting them in a very unusual way. They're conducting them one at a time in different venues, but never 2 venues at one time, as they move through the day, part of the COVID response and responsibility to allow folks to monitor what's going on in each of the committees. Beyond that, the Senate so far has set their appropriations committee and a full budget committee on June 1st. And so we'll start to see how they wrestle with the announced deficit budget that we're looking at. Beyond that, there's some very good news that I'm sure you're aware of. I think your leadership of your staff was very involved with Caltrans in ensuring that with all the free-flowing traffic, that is a side note to the stay-at-home orders. Construction contracts are working through the daytime hours, not just nighttime hours, and they're doing longer stretches when they're doing maintenance than they would have otherwise done. So I think there was a really good push from Contra Costa management. I will note and appreciated Jason's update on all the different 1, 2, 3, 3.5 coming up 4. AASHTO has been very actively engaged in seeking support letters for their effort to seek backfill of reduced transportation dollars across the country. The price that they've set is about a $50 billion that covers what's been missing, or what's been I can't say this correctly, what's not been received as anticipated, and looking forward as well. So because of the sheltering orders, traffic is down somewhere between 30 to 70%, and by and large between our VMT as a driver for fuel tax receipts and the sales taxes down very much for all the different activities between transit and self-help counties. We need to be supporting that. I know the staff did support a letter. I've been helping coordinate additional letters. We worked with the Caltrans director yesterday. We're trying to get them to do a letter. We'll see how that goes. So with that, I would turn to the last item, which is legislation that Senator Glazier has introduced. He took a bill and amended it to include language specific to Contra Costa County that deals with the sales tax rates by jurisdiction within the county. And I think this would be something that's is supportable, and Lindsay and I would recommend it. It does not change the requirement for how they are submitted to the ballot. And it does not raise the 2% cap, but it does provide clarity that in the case, in some instances, the 2% cap is reached, certain aspects of the underlying taxation, for example, BART would not be counted against the county tax. So this will give you, in the county level, another tool to generate funding for critical service at the county level. And the staff has recommended a support position to be adopted. And with that, I'll draw my presentation to a close.
Questions for Mark? Okay, now somebody tell me, do we need a
Yes.
vote? Huh?
Yeah, I would move that we take the recommendation to write a support letter for Senator Glazer's proposal.
I would second that.
Okay, we have a motion by
Pierce, second.
Arnott, a second from Pierce. Call the roll, please.
Committee member Arndrich,
Yes.
committee member Pierce,
Yes,
committee member Taylor,
Yes.
Vice Chair Geringer,
yes,
and Chair Butt.
Yes.
Okay, the motion is passed unanimously.
I had a
Next
question. Can I ask a question of Mark?
Yep.
Yeah, Mark, first of all, thanks for being here. By the way, this is probably for the rest of us about our 100th Zoom meeting in the past
Please.
8 weeks. So welcome aboard, finally. What's really happening just overall what's the legislature doing? What's happening to all of these other bills? What's your view of what's going to happen between now and June 30?
Well, in looking back over the last month and bringing it forward to now, I think the legislative arena has felt a little out of sorts, and not at cross purposes, but left in the cold by virtue of their returning to their districts. And the governor has gone on to make decisions. And according to public comments by legislators in the various oversight hearings, they feel that they weren't, the governor's office did not touch base with them in a timely manner in advance of some major decisions. So that has not really fired up into any sort of issue, but it's a latent underlying kind of thing that you hear about. The other item that I think was very interesting is both houses allowed their chairs to go through one-on-one with their committee members and help dissuade them from carrying certain bills so that they could focus on COVID response and possible future stimulus. Now, we haven't seen anything in the way of stimulus emerge yet, but I think that's going to be on the table in the coming weeks. But it's got to be done in the context of the new news that how big the deficit is actually going to be. I think there was a feeling with our healthy $20 billion reserve in a $220 billion budget that we would be able to see something or survive something in the $5 to $10, $15 billion shortfall deficit range. And it feels like this feels like it's a shock wave going through the Capitol right now as we're speaking. 50 billion is about a fifth of the overall state budget. So I think that's really the issue that's going to set the tone for the next couple of weeks.
And Mark, the last question I have is, and we're going to talk a little bit about it under our sales tax, but overall, the governor unilaterally said to defer property taxes, defer even income taxes technically. And with those deferrals, it seems as though that's an unfunded mandate. They defer it, they don't get it, so we don't get paid. Is that the way you're reading it, or do you think they're going to try to figure out some way to backfill? Because, if you really get down to it, that tax isn't theirs to defer. For example, our half-cent sales tax or something. And for a business to not pay that, that's not their legal authority. It's not their tax.
I agree with your sentiment and your perspective. I think the answer they would bring to the table would be they're not forgiving it. They're not for having you forego it. You're just having a deferral in the receipt of the taxes. And, I think, I think we'd spend more time going to court trying to prove a case. By the time that was done, we'd start seeing, hopefully if Q3, Q4, and next year's Q1 start to turn the corner on the economy, we start to see the receipts pouring in. So, I think the sentiment is correct. I just think they would just stiff arm everybody at this point in time.
Yeah, because I mean, just as as philosophically, what it really is an unfunded mandate that, quote, you could say from a political perspective, well, great, you've just helped people, but you've punished somebody else in that, which is how legislation is. You reward somebody, you injure somebody. And what's unique in Contra Costa County is, and there are other counties that have it, but specifically here in Contra Costa County, within each of our local jurisdictions, if somebody doesn't pay their property taxes, the county covers it. Because the county actually says, I'll take it, I'll make you whole. You are never out. Even in the downturn in the economy, the Great Recession, we were made whole no matter whether there were defaults, foreclosures, or whatever. And technically, the county made money doing it. They can't carry the burden. They're not sure. That is now made, it's just unbelievably devastating. And, while it's, yeah, we could fight it out in court. It's just, I think the message is, you want to defer your money, defer them. But if you're going to defer ours or somebody else's, that ought to be their ask and their decision, because we're getting punished and they're getting rewarded by this process. So philosophically.
Right. And I just make this additional note. That's all done by executive order, and the executive order is implemented via
The emergency declaration.
Yeah, via statute, which lays out the Emergency Services Act. It's not constitutional issue. It doesn't get to that level. It's merely a statutory authority combined with his constitutional supremacy over the rest of state government and the executive branch. He's got that going for him. It's an implied authority, and it's backed up by statute. So waiving and pushing changes like you were just discussing, it is definitely a dark gray area to me, the way I've been reading these executive orders. I think when this is all over with, young people in law school and in political science will be able to take a real close look at all these executive orders and try to figure out how close to the boundary did they get. So
Yeah.
That's my closing comment.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I think Randy, I'm sorry. There's somebody with a dark face there.
Your hand up.
Yes, sorry, commissioners. One of the things I wanted to talk about is, and I think Julie and our Commissioner Arnerich and Commissioner Pierce talked about this earlier in just a discussion about gas tax and the reduction in vehicle miles traveled and the impacts on revenue from the gas tax. And so I think that when you talk about us supporting AASHTO's position, I think we have to be careful. AASHTO is in it to support 52 states, the 50 states, Puerto Rico, and Washington, D.C. They're not in it to support the local agencies. And so they're going to take their cut. So I think we have made a position or sent a letter in talking about the impacts to sales tax, the reduction of sales tax and the impacts to transportation, at least in our county. We need to add into that the reduction in gas tax receipts from HUDA and also from SB1 that are going to impact some of the projects that we want to do that will help put people to work. So I think it's a little bit different than maybe supporting AASHTO. I think we ought to keep ourselves separated from AASHTO. AASHTO is worried about the states. They're not worried about local agencies like ours.
I forgot, Mark, there was one other question, and this is very specific. Highway 680, this starts back in the fall. Highway 680, particularly kind of from Walnut Creek to Alamo, is one of the worst conditions I've seen. It's as bad as it was before SB1. And in order to get it passed, or when we were doing the second round of assuring the money would be restricted, that road got fixed so fast. What's going on? What happened to the money? There was no patching. It's supposed to be for pothole repair, all of that. And now they're going to say, oh, sorry, we have no money. It's gone. It looks like the money's been gone. Is anybody paying attention? Caltrans got billions of dollars. Where the hell's the money going? Because they're not working. They haven't been working for 6 months, way before COVID-19.
So that kind of work that would take place on 680 to make the repairs you're talking about would be the CHOP program. And you're right, they got a huge injection. They got an amount equal to all the local agencies in the state got out of SB1. Basically, about a third of SB1 went to them, over $1.5 billion. They have to program it step by step through the commission. That's something because of lack of transparency in the past when directors and budget folks at Caltrans could move money around from project to project. The CPC tightened up the requirements, and we've enacted statutes that require programming very discrete elements of the CHOP program down to the very, crossing I's and crossing T's and dotting I's. And I think that helps slow things up. They did have not a very much of a shelf at all to draw on once SB1 passed, although we had known issues around the state. So I can't tell you what's gone on with the money. They've been allocating lots and lots of funds around the state in the SHOP program as projects have heated up and come out the door. But I'd be glad to take a deep dive into figuring out what's going on in the District 4 area with their SHOP program.
It'd be great to know, because it's just sad. It seems disingenuous that we show where we spend our money, we put a report in, and we have to spend that money. And you know what? It worked. I mean, in Danville, we have a PCI of 82. We went up from almost 10 points. Our roads are great. You get on the freeway. I have a brand new car that's got front end damage. It's so frustrating. It's the same reason. Sorry to be on Caltrans. The same reason we don't want to give them any money. If the local agencies, we'd have people out there in 2 weeks fixing it. Maybe that's our application, is reallocate that money for pothole repair, give us local agencies, we know how to get things done. Let us take over that function. We know how to do it. We can do it faster and cheaper. Very frustrating. Thank you, Mark. Sorry.
So I forgot to ask on this item if there are any members of the public who want to speak on it. Anybody out there? And I assume, even though we've already made and passed the motion, that the AASHTO issue, the letter we send will reflect the items that Randy introduced. So I don't think we need to redo that, but it'll be drafted by staff and we'll include those items, I assume. I see Randy nodding his head. Okay, I think we're ready to go to the next item, which is approval to amend the fiscal year 2019-20 budget for the Authority and Congestion Management Agency. Brian Kelleher will present this item. Brian?
Oops. Give me a second here while I try and figure out the right PowerPoint. Here we go. Good morning, Chair Button, Commissioners. I am Brian Kelleher, the Chief Financial Officer for CCTA. As we all know, sales tax revenues is very challenging at this time. As a financial professional, this is a very trying time, as your agencies as well are facing similar challenges. Our number one task will be to look at these challenges from the reduction in sales tax and implement a plan. Hisham has an adjacent staff report he'll be presenting right after me. It'll go through some of the things such as stopping the future allocations until some kind of recovery comes back. Peter and I had a conference call with the bus agencies talking about these reductions for this fiscal year, what potential reductions look like for next year. With that, I'll go through my staff report So as I mentioned, COVID-19, the executive order and the shelter in place has, we're all watching the stock market, we're all watching the news, we're all watching the governor. Every day, in the beginning, people were calling me, people were asking me, what are we going to do with sales tax? And just like the 2008-9 recession, you got to get ahead. You got to do your best to look at what levers you can pull, look at what actions you can take, look at different things that you can do to mitigate this. Unlike a city, we are sales tax based, just that's our sole revenue. Our capital projects are funded. We have the allocated Measure J funding. We also have the grants that are in place. I haven't seen, and I've been talking with Randy, there's no risk of losing any funding on those capacities. So all our current projects, everything is fully funded. Everything will have a balanced budget on those items. So as we look at just sales tax, in June of 2019, we were trying to follow the strategic plan. We worked with HDL to come with an estimate what we're going to do through 2034. And with the 2018 changes that the state made to the way they do the allocation, we had a little bit of a bump in there. We had a delay in processing. So that made last year's numbers come in quite higher than the year before. So with that, we were trying to get back to normal. We had initially budgeted. We saw some kind of slowdown coming. We had no idea what the slowdown was going to be. It was more going to be an economic slowdown, not a health issue. So we went with a $91.8 million budget. And as we started to work with HDL through the fiscal year that started in July, we started to see the strong numbers coming in. We had a really strong holiday season, which is the last quarter of 2019. We were looking at some projections and comparing them to prior quarters from the prior year. And we thought in working with HDL, our sales tax numbers were going to come in anywhere in the $94.5 to $95 million range. So at the mid-year budget, we had decided to increase the budget to $94 million. As we presented the budget in March, everything started to unfold a little bit. We didn't know how it was going to unfold. And obviously the last 7 weeks has been a very trying time. So therefore, my suggestion in working with HDL and paying attention to a number of meetings and budgeting with a bunch of finance professionals from GFOA, our California-based municipal finance officers, we've come down to a budget number for this fiscal year is about $80.5 million. So as I mentioned, every city in the United States is going to be facing these problems. So the sales tax projection is truly a moving target. And every day I get up, every day I look at the stock market, I get up, I listen to what the president has to say, I look at what our governor has to say, and I'm looking, and we're all waiting for all of the next steps to happen. So, in order for us to all get back to work, today is going to be a big day for California. The governor is going to announce some information. I don't know what that is. Maybe some of you do already. But hopefully we're going to start inching forward. Are we going to have V-shaped? Are we going to have a big U-shaped? Or are we going to have like an L-shaped recovery, which is going to take 1 year, 2 years to happen? With unemployment, people going back to work, they're going to have a lot of household debt. So this is kind of going to slow the discretionary spending. People are going to spend a lot less going out to dinner. There's the challenges with the restaurants, the seating capacity. So we're looking at a potential really slow recovery. Businesses with tight profit margins, such as restaurants, or with heavy debt like retailers, we're starting to see some of them file for bankruptcy. The restaurants and the governor did implement a 90-day sales tax payment extension. And what that does is for businesses with $1 million or less, they can have 90 days to make that payment. We'll see how that turns out. Hopefully we should get that money back in the next three months. It's 90 days. And then also all the small businesses, they may defer up to $50,000 for 12 months and make payments on it. So as we're working with each individual industry. And so when we try and make an amendment to the sales tax, we have to look at each industry. And so since January through March, everybody pretty much stopped going to work in middle of March. So your autos and transportation is down about 12% because January, February, everything was going really well. And then if you look at the individual industries, there's some, service stations, fuel going down 10%, restaurants, hotels going down 12%. And then we look at April to June, and we know, all of April, everything was empty. The streets were empty, the restaurants, retail's closed. So this budget here shows some things rolling back, coming back maybe late May, and then we're going to maybe have some action in June. So with that, and looking at all those categories, it's bringing it down to about $84 million. And as we look at the 12-month payment plan and working with HDL, we're looking at about a $3.5 million deferral. So with that, my suggestion is to bring us to about an $80.5 million projection. And so if you look at what we were budgeting in March, that's a 14.3% reduction. And as we look to next year, we're possibly looking at maybe another 5% reduction from that $80.5 million. But as this starts to evolve in the next couple of weeks, I'll be presenting in June our budget for next year, and I'll have a much better idea, hopefully, where we're going, and hopefully things will start to open back up. So as we kind of mentioned, this is the sales tax revenues over the last several years. You could see that with this 14.3% reduction, this brings us back to probably 2015, 2016 levels. So with that, staff seeks an approval of resolution 1923A, which will amend the 1920 budget all the way down to $80.5 million. So as I mentioned before, every day, every week, I'm trying to work with HDL. We keep having conversations. We're trying to stay ahead of the curve as much as possible. And with that, I'll open it up for questions, please.
Are there any questions or comments? Newell? Unmute, Newell. You're muted.
Thank you. Can I ask whoever's controlling this, don't mute the 5 of us on the board. We can do it ourselves because we weren't able, I wasn't able to do that till you actually took control over. Let's use the technology to support the meeting, not control it. So this is huge. So when we look at the reductions, we have seen in our local cities, we pretty accurately know what we see for the next 2-3 months, and it's huge. And we're looking at 3 different scenarios. We've also, most of us contract with the same consulting firm. I'm concerned that we have, while this 14.3%, that to me looks like about a midpoint. Those of us that have seen the same report are looking at 3 scenarios of reductions. Brian, which one did you pick? Sort of the middle one, and are we going to be revisiting this, or where did you land on this?
Well, the analysis behind for this one was maybe an opening up of some things in mid to late May. Obviously, if this continues and we have some issues, revamping and coming up, and as people start to get outside, people start to get shopping, and then we have to close down again, then it throws it out the window. And then we'll be looking at a much lower number. The good side is we had about $52 million in just the first 6 months. So if we're looking at, those are our busiest times of the year. Everybody buying stuff for back to school, getting ready, traveling, those sort of things, and the holidays. We had 2 good months, January and February. So I'm hoping we're right about this number. If it gets much worse, we're going to have to start making some other decisions, stopping current projects, maybe something like that.
Yeah, because I'll just share with you in our budget here at the authority is bigger than our entire town budget, including capital. But we're looking at best case optimistic, rose-colored glasses is a 15% drop. By the way, sales tax is only 40% of our revenue, but we see bigger drops than what you're estimating here. And we go all the way up to a 25% drop of revenues. So I guess what I am concerned about, we went through this some years back here, and this doesn't affect our capital side because that's different. This is all of our programs that affects. And we made some pretty deep cuts, and those lasted a long time. And there are estimates that some sectors, car sales, gasoline, restaurant, retail as a whole, are going to stay really low. And since the programs they're not decisions that you can make midstream easily. We have to basically tell people, look, we're confident on the worst case this we're going to get. If we get more, great. Programs can do that, but programs can't say halfway through, oh, gee, sorry, you're going to have to cut your bus, or you're going to have to cut all this. We have two in the SWAT area. We have two local bus systems that we run, and we can't midstream make cuts. So we can do it at the beginning of the year because we're set up in the same cycle. So I guess I'm concerned that, boy, an only 14% drop, and we're 100% for programs, sales tax oriented. That doesn't feel like to me a very conservative position. I don't know Brian, what you think, or other commissioners, but I'm a little concerned about that.
Julie?
Yeah, I agree with Newell. I am a little concerned. On the other hand, I think I read in the staff report that you're going to be doing some more analysis over the next month and come back in the June budget with some refined numbers. So I'm assuming this is a 1-month assumption and that we may be able to revise that again next month. Is that correct, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, we can always amend it in June again, and I would hate to, come out of the gate and say this is what it's going to be, and then come back with a lower number. But these times are completely different, and again, every number we throw out today, tomorrow, and the next day is going to be wrong. But when we look at Contra Costa as a whole, it's 1.1 million people. Comparison to a town or to a city or smaller agencies. Our sales tax is very diverse. It takes into consideration a much larger pool. So our reduction might be a smaller percentage. I could be wrong. But, the smaller cities that don't have the service stations, that doesn't have the cars, doesn't have, all the retail, they're going to be stronger reductions only because their pool of retailers and outlets and sales tax resources are much smaller. So that was part of the consideration. I don't know if that helps, but we're going to continue to look at this every week, every day. And I'm delaying my assumptions for next year only because I don't know how long this is going to be. And, we're going to have to make some hard decisions if this continues for another month or two, where we're going.
Yeah.
On one side, we are a program and we are a project-based agency. And so we've been collecting revenue for many, many years, and, we still have 14 years left. So there is a built up amount of capital from years prior to a healthy set of reserves, you could say, that just in case the projects division is running over. They've run out of their $38 million of reserve from last year. We might be able to, come back to the board and say, okay, let's implement a policy, a funding policy that allows internal loans that, the projects division can borrow from the ferry service that may have 10, 12, $13 million set aside for future allocations and do a temporary loan that way. We can go back into the capital market and do, some commercial paper or do some other kind of small loans to keep us moving forward. But the biggest thing we want to do, and as I mentioned, we had a conversation with a number of the bus agencies, is to get out and talk to them and let them know what we're thinking for next year, so that they don't expect, everybody's got an idea what the sales tax is going to be, but we told them we're going to reduce it to about $80.5 million. We're looking at a potential, HDL gave us an estimate, last week, which was probably wrong, or the week before, 2 to 5% for the following fiscal year. So I went with the 5%, only thinking this is going to take a long time for us to dig out of this, work together, and try and move forward.
Yeah, I guess it's obviously a fluid situation, and none of us has a clear crystal ball at this point. And so much depends on how quickly we open up and people are able to go back to normal, or whether they just feel like they're not safe going out and doing more. So I get that. And I also get that our local jurisdictions have different levels of sales tax impact. Certainly Clayton's sales tax is our third, a distant third, for our primary sources of revenue. As long as Gus doesn't reassess us, I think we'll be okay. But that said, I'm wondering on the policy side about the discussion between where these cuts should strategically be made. Do we need to be more surgical? Do we want to do an across the board programmatic cut? Or do we think that there's a different way of doing that? Where can we make cuts that hurt less for our citizens? We've got darn good streets in Clayton, and if we get a percentage cut of 14% on our sales tax return, we may delay a year and not do a paving program this year. That affects the economy overall because there are paving companies that need work. On the other hand, does that help keep the buses running? Does that help keep some of the other services that we provide operational? And so those are some of the strategic things I think we maybe want to think about, rather than just an across the board cut. I don't know. I think it's a discussion we need to have.
You want to respond or go on to the next?
Randy's looking to talk there.
Yeah, I mean, Hisham's going to talk about it in one of his his presentation, some of the actions the authority is looking to do, such as cutting future allocations. Hisham, I don't want to steal your thunder, delaying some allocations for some programs in the next couple of years. And then I think I saw Randy with his hand up as well.
Yeah, Randy?
I was going to say that Brian has done a great job of trying to estimate the amount of sales tax and modify the budget now versus when you don't have enough time and you have to really make tough decisions. And so he has always been, I gave a presentation to the PMA group the other night, and HDL says that sales tax is going to rise by 5%. Brian builds a budget around 3%. And then he adjusts sometime around now up or down. So that's really what he's trying to do, is end the year so we're in the ballpark to close the year end. But this part is just part and parcel to the entire budget. And you're going to get a presentation next about the other cuts that you're asking about, or reductions. Should we focus our money on projects? We need to be prepared for any stimulus package. And I'm assuming, and this is an assumption, that it's much like the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act in 2009. But if it's not, if it's different, and they're willing to allocate dollars for projects for design purposes to get them ready for construction, then that would be a change. But we're assuming that we need to get some projects ready to go in order to get access to some of the stimulus dollars that may appear here in the near future. And so in order to do that, we can't work on all the projects. And so I've asked Tim and Hisham to take a look at those projects that are meaningful, that have the biggest benefit cost ratio, and let's focus our dollars and our effort on those. And then forget about some of these other projects that are out in the future and don't waste time on them because we don't have that kind of time. So you're gonna get a number of proposals, including what Brian says, in order to, we've always known we have a pinch point in the amount of debt service and principal that we pay in 2021, 22, the line gets very close. That line could go, if it goes like this, we're gonna have to bridge that gap. And so we've tried to develop a strategy for that. And Brian briefly touched on that. And he wants to put a proposal together for a loan program because we do have dollars in the bank that are for ferry service, for example, because it took us a while to get ferry service underway, and it's not spending at the rate that we thought it was going to be spending, and now it's actually shut down. And so there's some flexibility in the budget that we want to bring to you to have you ponder and then hopefully make a decision on how we move forward. So I think we're in a bad situation, but we're in a good position. And so you'll hear more from Hisham and Tim on the next agenda item.
No.
Yeah, Randy, thanks for that. That's well said. Question back to Brian. Brian, what was at the peak of the downturn in the Great Recession, what was our sales tax drop? What was the greatest percentage we hit?
You know, that's a great point. So when we looked at the sales tax, we tried to go back. You always go back in time and try and follow a pattern. You know, the unemployment wasn't as bad back then, but we did see a 19% drop. You know, in the Great Recession. So this is kind of, if we implement a 5% next year, that puts us right at the 19.5% reduction. But you know, if you remember back then, it kind of happened a little slower, 13% one year, and then there was another 5% the following year, and then a few percentage points the next year. So we're taking a big swing at this 14.5%. Hopefully we're close. If not, we'll be back with updates, and you know, and I'm more than happy to get updates out whenever I get them.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Just for FYI, in the downturn of the economy last time in our community, just as an example, and we're pretty average. We don't have car dealerships. We don't have anything. So we didn't have those huge spikes, but we were hurt like everybody else. We didn't lay anybody off. This is so deep and so devastating. We look backwards, we're more than double in every category of every financial loss you can imagine. And that's just us. Think about the cities that have all of these others, the Walnut Creeks, people that have car dealerships, all of those things. This isn't what we've seen. And we're cutting staff, we're things that we never thought. And I've been through, as an elected, 3 downturns. This one is unprecedented. It is so different and it's so deep. So just keep it in mind that this is not, it is already worse by a magnitude of twice what we saw in the entire last recession. And so in projecting, what we're all doing is trying to project the recovery. That's my concern. I don't think the recovery is what everybody thinks it is. There's no evidence that it will recover. People don't have the money. So.
Yeah, like the cities, you know, hopefully, you know, your biggest revenue source is always property tax. So the biggest thing is keeping an eye on the unemployment rates and then seeing how that trickles into the property taxes. Because back in 2008 and 9, that's where we saw the hugest hits at the cities. Was you lost all your revenue sources. So now we're losing TOT, We're losing sales tax, which are your smaller, for some of the agencies, which is the smaller part of your budget. So once the property taxes start to become affected, if they do become affected, that's when it's going to get much, much worse.
Okay, anybody else have comments or questions? I can only see 5 people here on the screen, so there you go, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other hands up. Are there any members of the public who want to comment on this? I don't see that, so I will entertain a motion to approve this proposal.
So moved.
Second,
Okay, who was the mover?
Newell and Julie.
Second by Pierce. Okay, call the roll, please, Christina.
Committee member Arnrich,
Aye.
committee member Pierce,
aye.
committee member Taylor. I can't, oh. did you
Thumbs
do it?
up.
He's got a
Thumbs up. Okay, got it, thank you. Vice Chair Geringer
I,
and Chair Butt.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the proposed interim measures to prepare for Measure J, sales tax revenue reduction due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Hisham Noemi will present this item.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members. My name is Hisham Noemi. I'm the Director of Planning. I'm the Director of Programming. It's good to see everyone. We are asking you today to approve Resolution 2009P, which will help us be prepared for COVID-19 impacts on our revenues. As you heard from Brian, there is a high degree of uncertainty about how long, what are the long-term impacts on the economy and how quickly we can recover. Since we don't know how bad things could get, we want to be prepared for the worst case scenario. My focus here is to make sure that our overall Measure J expenditures don't exceed our revenues when the measure expires in 14 years, and that we continue to have a positive cash flow as we get there. With that, I have a few slides to share with you. As you know, when the voters approved Measure J in 2004, it was based on the assumption of a certain amount of revenue it would generate. The expenditure plan assigned funding to specific projects and different programs based on that revenue estimate. The plan did not have a contingency line item for revenue reductions, such as the one caused by the Great Recession in 2008 or COVID-19 in 2020. For the programs, they get a fixed percentage of our revenues, and although the amounts fluctuate based on what we actually collect, the percentages are fixed in the expenditure plan. About 57.5% of our revenues go to the programs, like the return to source, the bus operations, and other programs we have. To accelerate the delivery of the projects, the authority took the strategy of issuing bonds against the remaining 42.5% of our revenues. This strategy allowed us to build projects sooner at a lower cost, counteracting some of the 2008 recession impacts. It allowed us to take advantage of low bid climate during the recession, low interest rates on bonds, and one-time infusion of state and federal funds like the Proposition 1B and stimulus funding. To ensure our project expenditure and debt service cost on these bonds stay within that 42.5%, we update our strategic plan every couple of years based on new projections of our revenues and debt service costs. About 7 months ago in September, you approved the 2019 Measure J strategic plan. It actually reduced the revenue forecast as it assumed a slowdown in the economy in the next couple of years. We reduced our overall revenues by $136 million and deleted about $96 million in funding for capital projects. despite our best efforts to be prepared, it appears that COVID-19 will take a bigger bite of our revenues than what we assumed. This is like an earthquake in terms of how sudden it hit and how deep it cut into the economy. As you can see in the chart, we were on course to beat our forecast until this happened. The black line shows our actual revenues based on the adjusted mid-year budget you just approved. In the 2019 strategic plan, we programmed $754 million in Measure J funds to capital projects. That's after we removed 96 million in project funding to match our lowered revenue forecast. By the end of this fiscal year, we anticipate spending 96% of that amount, or 724 million, leaving about $30 million to be expended on projects over the next 14 years. Out of the remaining 30 million, there is about 20 million for projects that have not yet started. By eliminating funding to the project that haven't started, we should be able to absorb about $47 million hit to our overall revenue without impacting our ongoing commitments to projects or Measure J programs. To be prepared to take a larger hit to our revenues, larger than the 47 million, we are recommending that you take several actions listed in Resolution 2009P in your packet. The first action is to suspend appropriation to start new projects. This will apply not only to projects in our Measure J strategic plan, but also to the TLC and PIDBIKE programs. By new projects, we mean projects that the authority have not made any appropriations of Measure J funds to. We should not be asking you to approve any new appropriations to start new projects in the next few months until we get a clear picture of the impacts. If a project sponsors asks for an appropriations to begin design or construction, we should ask them to wait until unless they can demonstrate that they will lose other fund sources or have other exceptional circumstance, like the need to mitigate a safety issue. Not only this will help us preserve our remaining Measure J funds earmarked for projects, but will also help us build a shelf of ready projects in case we get stimulus funds. As you probably know, if we receive stimulus funding, most likely projects that can start construction within the next 6 months will be at the top of the priority list. The second action is related to project savings. We should keep any savings we get on ongoing or completed project in a reserve and not reprogram it to other projects. At this time, we're anticipating to have between $4 to $5 million in savings on projects like the 680 southbound HOV that's underway, or the Highway 4 East widening. The Caldecott Tunnel landscaping will have some savings, among others. Having that reserve will help us cushion the impact of COVID-19. The third action is something we're already doing. Many of our Measure J operational programs, like bus service and school bus programs, receive funding at the beginning of the fiscal year before actual revenues are known. To avoid over allocation, Peter, our Director of Programs, keeps 10% of the allocation until he gets to the end of the fiscal year, when he does a true-up payment based on the actual revenue. We will continue to do the same based on our reduced revenue estimate for next fiscal year to avoid over allocations of our Measure J program funds. The fourth action is something that you already agreed to do in the 2019 strategic plan, which is to delay issuing the next call for projects for the TLC and the bike programs. I view this as our safety valve if things go really bad, just like what happened in 2008 recession, where we had to eliminate the East County share of the TLC program to keep our commitments on Highway 4 widening and EBART. We may need to do the same in the future here to avoid impacting other programs in our expenditure plan. This action allows us to absorb between $50 to $70 million hit on our revenue without having to impact other programs. The last action is meant to keep us to help us maintain a positive cash flow, as we have several projects funded by grants, like the ADS grant and the MOD grant we just got. We will submit reimbursement requests monthly as opposed to every 2 to 3 months, in order to reduce the amount of Measure J we have to front on these projects. Besides the actions in Resolution 2009P, there are certain things we're already doing as staff, which is to work with our partners to help reduce the demand on our Measure J funds. That includes asking FHWA or FTA and the CTC to reduce match requirements. We also asked FTA to make costs incurred before completing the pre-award audits on our ADS grant eligible for reimbursement, which actually they just granted, saving us about $765,000 in Measure J funds.
Wow.
I would congratulate Tim for spearheading this effort. We also are monitoring basically any opportunities to refinance our bonds and reduce our interest costs, and looking for ways to use other fund sources to supplant our Measure J funds on different projects. For example, if we can convince WETA to use RM3 funds when they're freed up from the litigation in lieu of our Measure J for the Richmond Ferry operations, that will greatly help our cash flow. We spend about $3 to $4 million for ferry operations for that project. They're not going to lose their Measure J money, they'll just get it later. Other future actions we can take if things get really bad is basically developing an allocation plan. We're recommending these because this is really unprecedented situation, and coupled by the fact that we don't have a new measure. The first item is the development of an allocation plan that looks at all of our existing contracts and appropriations to see if they can be terminated, suspended, or reduced. The goal here is to plan for reductions beyond the $47 million that I mentioned earlier without having to impact the programs. In the process, we will end up prioritizing these contracts and appropriations, which could feed into the next strategic plan discussion. The second item is the development of a fund exchange program. As you know, it takes money to get money. For example, federal funds have a 20% match requirements. Some of the SB programs have 30% or 100% match requirements. Without having matching funds from a new measure, we can't even compete for these sources. We are looking for possible other ways to help us get matching funds. One idea we're talking about is to maybe loan our STIP funds to other CMAs in exchange for their flexible local money that we could use them as a match on any of our projects. Because STIP funds have so many restrictions, we may not always be able to use them as a match. So that's one idea. It will require that we find a CMA that's willing to do that. Another idea is to consolidate all of our program STIP funds on a single project to get it shovel ready and provide the needed match. Right now, in the 2020 STIP, we have $20 million programmed for 3 major projects that have a total of $200 million in shortfall. Focusing the $20 million on one project may help us advance at least one project. We will also be looking for ways to build a shelf of shovel-ready projects that can take advantage of stimulus funds. For example, as I mentioned earlier, if a sponsor comes now and asks for Measure J money to start construction, we may want to put that request on hold for a few months, as the project may be an ideal candidate for stimulus funding. We will have to evaluate each case carefully to ensure we're not putting other funds they may have at risk. And also to make better use of our limited Measure J funds that are remaining, we may also think about incentivizing cities to bundle projects like pavement jobs. You heard Randy talk about this in the past. If we can get, if we get to program federal stimulus funds in the near future, we may be able to give priority to the cities that agree to do that over others. These are some of the ideas we're thinking about and wanted to know if we should pursue further. Some of these ideas may actually favor one sub-region over another in the short term, or they may make some of our cities uncomfortable as we take a larger role in administering their projects. But these are unusual times, and business as usual may not be the best way to go. With that, we are asking you to approve Resolution 2009P and to provide us with direction on whether to work on an allocation plan and or a fund exchange program. Of course, we will bring specific proposals for your approval on the exchange program once we have something concrete. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Hey, questions or comments? Julie?
Yeah, Hisham, how realistic is it that there are even going to be future STIP funds for the next few years? I mean, I realize we've got some that are already allocated. Can we count on those? And I mean, if we're going to dry up again like we did the last time, it doesn't do us much good to bank on those.
Yes, that's a very good question. Most likely future STIP funds will be less than what we've been getting. And there is a high chance that the CTC may ask us to delay the program to projects in the STIP. But if we do an exchange, if we loan our STIP funding that's currently programmed to another CMA, it'll be basically up to them to do an AB 3090 and advance the funds basically in return for paying us with other flexible money. So there might still be an opportunity with the existing programming that we have, but you're absolutely right. Future programming, we just don't know what's going to happen because, you know, not only sales tax is down, but gas tax is down, and that's what funds the STIP.
Right. So a follow-on question for another one of your suggestions. You're talking about maybe asking cities to bundle projects. I've wondered frequently and mentioned this in the past, but is there any reception to the idea, and I'm addressing my colleagues here, to possibly having the cities bundle their repaving projects into a single project administered by the authority, perhaps, to get better bids? We're always competing for those paving contracts. And I know some of us don't have big enough contracts to get decent bids sometimes. Would this be maybe a prime opportunity for us to try to combine some of those projects to get more for our smaller dollars? Any of my colleagues have an answer?
You know, I think realistically, Julie, that's a great idea. However, construction costs are dropping so fast, it's unbelievable, faster than what we saw in the Great Recession. The other reality is, and I'll use Danville as an example, even with our high PCI, we supplement all of our paving projects with general fund money. That is now zero. We don't have the money. You know, we have, and I just looked it up, from our HDL projections for sales tax, our best estimate from them was 20% drop. And the worst was 40. And so we're right in between the two. So reality is we're taking the worst case for our pavement project, and the only thing we're doing, and it's a much smaller program, a third of what we've been spending is the money that we get from restricted funds. And that's, yeah, so maybe that works. You know, maybe the Lorinda cities and Clayton, because of the scale, might make sense. It's probably as much geographic as it is, total volume, but I also don't want to take away the resources of the agency of trying to help us do that when there is likely to be those stimulus projects out there. And that takes a lot of work, and our resources are just as well. So if it can happen, great. I think what we just heard, though, the proposal of this approach, I think this is great. This is really well thought out. I do think we have to be very strategic to keep our resources for getting those stimulus money. And I think that should be a real priority, because on the other side, there's nothing we can do. We get the revenue that we get, and we spend it according to the formulas that we have that are pretty much preset. So I would hope that staff's priority is to look for those opportunities, and to not forget, MTC got a huge amount of money that they gave away to our transit agencies and things like that. Look how much they gave to BART, to AC Transit, to everybody. So while we're just hurt, we didn't get any of that really, but the agencies that we help, they got a lot of help to cover their costs and really make them pretty whole. So I would just personally put this as a low priority. If our agency has capacity at the time to do it and it makes sense, but I would really want to keep us, moving towards getting those opportunities for stimulus monies and getting our packages ready.
Yeah, just as a kind of a response to that, and I'm just sort of brainstorming here too. Clayton doesn't get a lot, so we generally bundle a couple of years together before we do a paving project. I'm wondering on other jurisdictions, whether, because you said you always augment with general fund, we don't have a general fund to do that with, at least the capacity for it, so we've never done that. But I'm wondering if, I seem to remember that in our regulations, we have a certain time that we're supposed to expend these funds. I know we allow for a couple of years of accumulation. I don't know if it might need to be longer than that for some jurisdictions to be able to get efficient projects. And I just need to remind myself what that number of years of accumulation might be, because I honestly don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah,
Sean, do you know what that is?
I'm sorry, Julie, I missed the question. If you can repeat it.
The question is, several of us accumulate more than 1 year's worth of Measure J 18% allocations in order to accumulate enough to be able to do a reasonable project and get decent bids. I'm wondering, isn't there a time limit on how long we can retain those funds before we expend them?
Not the return to source money.
So we could save up 10 years and do one huge project? I mean, theoretically.
Randy is waving his hand. I'm not aware of the deadline.
Yeah, so what you remember is when we go to Wall Street and we bond against future revenue, the IRS requires us to allocate those dollars and expend them. I think it's a 3-year period. Otherwise, that's you can't go out and bond against way out there and just hoard the money and then get interest rates that are higher than the interest rates you're paying. So that's what you remember when we made those presentations in New York and in Boston, that we had to expend those dollars. On the return to source, the longer you wait, the more Brian makes because we don't allocate it to you. And great. Don't ask. We don't.
The secret.
Okay. Well, I thought there was something back probably 20 years ago when Walnut Creek was saving up to redo all of Ignacio Valley at one time. And there was some consternation about the fact that they were saving more than a couple of years worth of revenue in order to afford that huge project. And maybe we fixed that regulation way back then. So
Concord's been doing that for years, and that was one of
Yeah.
the criticisms on our last Measure J round. That, hey,
Exactly.
they're not
And-
spending their money.
right, right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other, Teresa?
So first of all, I do want to thank staff for the previous report around the sales tax adjustment, and then the very thorough report on how to allocate that reduction and how we can work to make sure we have the reserves and the resources to get through this, whatever it's going to end up being. Julie, in response to your comment about cities working together to bundle projects, Newell touched on it. La Miranda has done it. I'm sure that there are ways as we go forward we can do it even better, even more efficiently. And it was probably a CCTA, recommendation or putting the bug in our ear. So we have done that already. I also agree with Newell that unless staff says that it's a really high benefit from putting a lot of time in having them work with us to, with the cities to begin to bundle that we could do that on our own, and they can focus more on those bigger dollar savings and projects. But I just wanted to say thank you and to comment that there are ways and examples that we're doing that already. And Randy has his hand up.
I'd add, one of the things that we also do in the background is give information to our commissioners that go to MTC that make recommendation on SB1 competitive grant program allocations and RM3 allocations, which I'll send all of you. I sent it to Commissioner Pierce, Commissioner Worth, and Supervisor Glover. But I'll send you the latest recommendations for allocations for projects coming out of Senate Bill 1, competitive grant program, and also RM3. And once again, there's a lot of money available there, and we need to do a better job of going into San Francisco and stomping our feet and making a pitch, a good pitch on, why we deserve more of an allocation than we think we're going to get. And so we're also, I was trying to mention, there's a lot of things in the air, but when it comes to Measure J, I think we've tried to provide a well thought out strategy on dealing with that portion, which is unfortunately shrinking to 80 million, but there's hundreds of millions of dollars out there of other monies and that we're competing for all the time.
And thank you for doing that.
Any other comments? Is there anyone from the public who wishes to comment on this? I don't see or hear anybody. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
So, motion by Arnrich, second by Geringer, right? Okay,
Yep.
Call the roll, please, Christina.
Committee Member Arnrich,
Aye.
Committee Member Pierce,
Yes.
Committee Member Taylor,
Thumbs up.
Vice Chair Geringer,
Aye.
and Chair Butt.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
I have to say just a quick comment. I am just flabbergasted. I look forward to hearing Bob talk. This is just like I feel like I'm lost. I'm not in the right room. But we love you, Bob. We miss you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the authorization to execute agreement number 541 with WSP USA for environmental and engineering services. Tim Hale will present this item.
Good morning, commissioners. My name is Tim Hale, the Deputy Executive Director for Projects, and here to present this item for SR 239, which is a legislatively adopted route on the California State Highway System. And the language describes 239 as a potential roadway linking State Route 4 in Brentwood to Interstate 205 or Interstate 580 in Tracy and San Joaquin County. The SR 239, as all you are aware, received a federal earmark totaling about $14 million for the study of the project and construction of the project. And the feasibility study was completed in 2014, and a project initiation document with Caltrans approval and oversight was completed in August of 2015. The project is ready to proceed to the project approval and environmental document, and the completion of the PAED phase will advance the project to the shelf ready stage in order to take advantage and compete for future funding opportunities. The scope of the PAED is to identify the alignment of SR 239, provide the environmental clearance for SR 239 at a programmatic level. And that's actually a new strategy that District 4 and Caltrans have not attempted to do yet. And this is more of a programmatic environmental document that helps streamline things and allows us to kind of move forward different segments of the project as funding becomes available into a tier 1 and tier 2 process. The other goal of completing PAED would be able to facilitate route adoption with the California Transportation Commission, and also start preserving right of way along the corridor, so for future segments and future construction of the project. The work will be funded by a combination of the federal funds, and the county, Contra Costa County, is providing all of the necessary local matching funds, as well as reimbursing CCTA for staff time for this project. The authority released a request for proposal number 19-5 in July 15th of 2019. The authority received 4 proposals from Jacobs, Parsons Transportation Group, TY Lin, and WSP. The interview panel ranked WSP team as the most qualified firm based on the qualifications and services listed in the RFP. Staff has concluded the negotiations with WSP on the scope of work, and Caltrans has completed the financial audit for the contract, and the project is ready to move forward. Staff is seeking authorization for the chair to execute agreement number 541 with WSP in the amount of $10,360,589 for environmental and engineering services, and allow the executive director to make any non-substantive changes to the language. And that concludes my staff report.
Questions or comments?
I believe I have to note that committee member Taylor, I don't know if his call dropped but I need to notate that he is no longer in the meeting.
He's on the phone with me. His car took over. That's why he can't talk. So I've got him out of Zoom. I'm putting him back in Zoom. So if you want to vote, verbal vote, he's on the phone with me. Are you on the phone with me?
Tell him yes. All right.
Terrific.
Okay, Neil, you had a question or comment?
So Tim, just maybe a little background. This is a Canadian firm. And it looks like they got this because they did a great interview, just based on your scoring. So, yeah, what's our history with them? What pushed WSP over everybody else? It's a big.
So the push was that WSP really came through a really methodical approach to developing and further refining the alternatives of the project. They actually addressed some of the concerns from the county. Some of the alternatives in the original project initiation document, the county did not necessarily like the Byron Airport connector Armstrong Road alignment. And so WSP really addressed and focused on that concern with the county and came up with an alternative alignment, which actually turns into more of a hybrid alignment with the SR 239, which the interview panel and the county all really aligns their approach to the alternatives in the project. Also, the project manager has done previous work with CCTA in the past on State Route 4 and other projects. And WSP has had a good track record with CCTA on delivering their projects on time and on budget.
Great. And how big is their footprint here? Where are they?
So they're based in offices in San Francisco, Oakland. I mean, it's a very large firm.
Yeah, I see there.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you say we had experience with that project manager, was he working for WSP or was he working for another company?
So it was actually she, her name's Michelle Bello. She's actually attending the call right now.
Okay, great.
And so, yeah, she's worked on I-80 Central for CCTA for WSP. And that was actually part of Parsons Brinkerhoff before WSP purchased PB.
Okay, great. All right, that's good to know. Thank you for that.
Other comments or questions? Are there any members of the public who wish to comment? No.
I move to accept the proposal as presented.
Second,
Okay, motion by Arner, second by Pierce. Call the roll call vote, please.
Committee member Arnrich,
Aye.
committee member Pierce,
aye.
committee member Taylor. I can't see a video with a thumbs up.
He's muted. Hey, Bob, can you hear us now?
Doesn't sound like it.
So he voted yes.
Okay,
He's still on mute. He can't unmute himself.
Okay.
it looks unmuted here.
It's on his side.
Vice Chair Geringer
Aye.
and Chair Butt.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
The next item is the Bollinger Canyon Road Iron Horse Trail Bicycle and Pedestrian Overcrossing. Authorization to execute cooperative agreement number 90.12.01 with Caltrans, FHWA, and the City of San Ramon for project oversight services. Ivan Ramirez will present this item.
Good morning, Chairs Butt and committee members. Ivan Ramirez, the Director of Construction for the Authority. And if you don't mind, Chair, I do have 4 items that are related to the Bollinger Canyon Iron Horse Trail project. So maybe I will advance my presentation and maybe we can take a vote on those 4 items towards the end of the project, if you don't mind.
Did you say 4 items? I don't see 2.
We have the project oversight agreement that you just described. I have a contract approval for COWI, which is Design Services Consultant.
Oh, I see. There are 4 sub items. Okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, let's take them all at once. Yeah.
Thank you. Give me a second here to jump on a brief presentation. Can you confirm that you can see my slides?
Not yet.
Okay, hold on one second here. Sorry about that.
Share your screen.
That's exactly right, Commissioner. All right, is that okay?
Coming up.
There you are. Perfect.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you. So
Going to be a pretty project.
we hope so, Commissioner. So this is a project that the City of San Ramon has undertaken as a project sponsor. And what they're looking to achieve is construct a signature bridge as people enter their city center. The bridge has been selected to be a cable stay bridge with a approximate length of 200 feet. Currently, the estimate of the entire project is $21 million. And the City of San Ramon and CCTA have agreed for CCTA to be the implementing agency of the project. And the project delivery method has been selected to be the construction manager, general contractor approach. So give you a little history of what the authority has done in regards to this project. We started with the co-op agreement that was approved by the board in June 2019, where the City of San Ramon asked the authority, and the authority undertook the responsibility of implementing agency. And on November of 2019, the authority approved the CMGC delivery method. In December of 2019, Caltrans approved the CMGC guidelines for this project, guidelines or procedures, and that in effect granted the approval from Caltrans and FHWA, because this project has federal money, to proceed with the CMGC process After that, in January 2020, we started with the procurement process for the independent cost estimator, or ICE, short for independent cost estimator, and the project designer. And in April of this year, the environmental clearance was finally achieved, and that was responsibility of the city of San Ramon. So it was a good effort on their part to get it done. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a, just to remind you what the CMDC project delivery approach is. And this is when an owner hires a design consultant, an independent cost estimator, and a construction manager to do the design of the work. And what is really beneficial from the delivery process is that the design consultant has coordination with the construction manager to achieve increased design control, reliable cost management, increase innovation and collaboration, reduce risk and management of risk, and also the streamline the project schedule. So all those things are achieved because there's a constant communication between what the construction manager, who in effect is a contractor, giving that feedback to the design consultant, and then the consultant reacting to that feedback. In addition to that, there's an independent cost estimator that at several milestones during the design of the process gets together with both the design consultant and the construction manager to come to get a good idea of what the cost is going to be as it progresses. That gives the opportunity. So for instance, if the cost or certain decisions have been made that increases the cost, then that gives an opportunity to the design consultant to adjust and make the changes so that the cost could be decreased. As an example, once the design process is completed, the construction manager submits a final proposal of what they think they can build the project for. So then it engages in negotiations with the owner, CCTA, with the assistance of the cost estimator and the design consultant. And if the owner agrees to that, in this case, CCTA, in direct consultation with the city, then that construction manager becomes the general contractor. So they go, contract is executed, and they go and build the work. Should the construction manager and the authority cannot reach an agreement, then in that case, the construction manager is told that he's no longer needed, and he cannot bid on the project because he has too much information, and the project is put up to bid like any normal project as a design bid build project delivery method. So a little bit of what's coming ahead. Today we're asking you to approve the ICE and the designer contracts. That would allow us to begin the design process. And at the same time, we're asking you to allow us to release the request for qualifications from the general contractor, or CM. And once those two activities are accomplished, then we're going to get together, all the team members, review the 35% PS&E, and start working on innovations and risk workshops. We're going to prepare a cost model so that the ICE, the design consultant, and the contractor are looking at the same numbers with the same assumptions. For instance, like how much profit, how much markup they're going to have, how much they're going to pay their subcontractors, and so on. And we're also going to prepare a schedule. And those sequence of events that are shown there, those are required per the agreement that we have with FHWA. So in order for us to keep the process going, FHWA has to be invited. They have to participate, or at least listen. And then that will allow us to comply with a oversight agreement that you're also going to be voting on later. So with that, Commissioner, I have 4 requests. The first one is we seek authorization for the chair to execute cooperative agreement 90-1201 with Caltrans, FHWA, the City of San Ramon, to provide project oversight services and to allow the executive director to make non-substantive changes to the language. So you want to take a vote, Commissioner?
Oh, I thought that was it.
Are we going to first or second it, this item?
Well, actually, could we do questions first?
Oh,
Yes.
First of all, Ivan, this is exciting. I'm looking forward to see this format work. Glad you're on it. I think you are one of our great innovators, and very exciting. The really only question, you've done great presentations in the past on this. San Ramon has signed up on all these agreements. They agree with all of these recommendations, and no, is there any outstanding issues with them?
Yeah, no, Commissioner. So it's a good point. I was gonna bring it up as we went through the consultant agreements, in particularly because we have for the independent cost estimator, we only had one proposer come in, and we had to get into close discussions with the city because obviously being one proposer, we have to have their approval to proceed to move forward. So yeah, in general, in regards to the POA, this particular item, staff at the staff level, they have approved it. Their attorney is currently reviewing it. And that's why we leave it open for the executive director to make non-substantive changes. Regarding the ICE agreement and the design services agreement, they have approved. They were actually very, very active in the scope, the negotiations of scope and cost with the design consultant. They were at the table the whole time, so they have blessed it. And in regards to the RFQ, that is something that, because it's structured in a certain way with how the contract is structured and how the RFQ reflects some of that structure in the contract, they have not really had a lot of input, but they did approve the CMGC procedures guideline that I mentioned earlier, and the RFQ follows very closely what those guidelines stipulate. So the answer to your question, in long ways, yes.
Great. Well, this is exciting. This is going to be a great project for San Ramon. Well deserved, and it took them a long time. I'd move the item.
Second. Tom is muted.
Tom, you're
You
muted.
need to unmute.
Upper right corner.
We have,
There you go.
well, we have actually 4 sub items. Can we vote on them all at once? Can somebody tell me?
I don't see why not.
Okay.
All right, so let me talk briefly about the other 3 items, and then we can vote on them all at the same time.
Okay.
So in regards to the design services, staff seeks authorization for the chair to execute agreement number 545 with COE in the amount of $2,327,368 and a contingency amount of $438,714 for a total agreement value of $2,766,082 to provide design and engineering services, and allowing the executive director to make any non-substantive changes to the language and delegate authority to negotiate and execute amendments within the contingency amount to execute to executive director or designee.
Well, so 3 of these are authorizations to execute agreements, and the 4th sub item is authorization to issue requests for qualifications. So can we take all 4 of these sub items at once, or do we take the 3 agreements and do them at once?
Commissioner, I believe that I can finish and then you can vote all of them at once.
Okay, all right, I thought you were done. Go ahead.
So let me, so the next ask by staff is authorization for the chair to execute agreement number 546 with Tricertus in the amount of $210,000 to provide independent cost estimate services and to allow the executive director to make any non-substantive changes to the language. And last, staff seeks authorization to issue RFQ 20-3 to obtain statement of qualifications from firms interested in completing pre-construction services with the option to issue a subsequent contract for construction services. So those are the 4 items that we have in front of you. I am prepared to answer any questions regarding any of these asks that we have for the committee.
Are there any questions or comments?
I just confirmed that the motion was for 5.1 through 5.4.
Got it. Okay, motion by Arnerick, second by
Pierce,
Geringer.
Pierce,
Oh, Pierce, okay, sorry. I can't see all you guys here. Would you do a roll call vote, please, Christina?
Yes. Committee Member Arnerich,
Aye.
Committee Member Pierce,
yes,
Committee Member Taylor, I don't know if that's a yes or a no. Vice Chair Geringer
Aye.
and Chair Butt.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously for all 4 items.
Okay, that brings us to correspondence and communications. Anybody have any comments on those items? Hearing none, we'll go to commissioner and staff comments. Chair's comments and reports. I have none, except just to say that I appreciate staff putting together this Zoom meeting. Went fairly well, except we couldn't hear from Bob, but maybe next time. Are there any comments from other commissioners? I don't hear any. Executive staff comments? That's a no, Randy? Okay, any other business? Okay, so our next meeting is scheduled now for June 4th, 2020 at 8:30 a.m. Thank you and have a nice day. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Paul. See you tonight at the mayor's conference.
That's right.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. See you tonight.
Meeting adjourned at 10:21.